Welcome back. You are listening to the home of forbidden romances. Prepare yourself, because tonight's story will leave you breathless. The elevator chimed, a sharp, digital knell that sounded less like an arrival and more like a sentence passed by a heartless judge. And in that split second, Julian knew he was going to die, or worse, be discovered. He clawed at his tie, the silk suddenly feeling like a noose of barbed wire, his vision swimming in a haze of sickening, sweet heat. It hit him not like a wave, but like a sledgehammer to the temple. The biological imperative, the pheromonal explosion he had spent 5 agonizing years suppressing with black market chemical cocktails. The doors slid open, revealing the panoramic glass office of the CEO, and there he stood, Cassius Thorne, the apex alpha of the city's financial district, a man who could smell a drop of fear in a hurricane, turning his predatory, steel-gray gaze directly toward Julian. Julian stumbled, his shoulder checking the doorframe. The air in the penthouse office was usually sterile, smelling of ozone, expensive leather, and the faint, cold scent of Cassius's own pheromones, like crushing rain on granite. But now, to Julian's traitorous senses, that scent was amplified 1,000 times. It was overwhelming. It was enticing. It was a command. "You're late, Vane," Cassius said, his voice a low rumble that vibrated in Julian's sternum. The alpha didn't look up from the tablet in his hand immediately, his silhouette framed by the sprawling, rain-slicked skyline of Neo-Seoul behind him. "And you have the quarterly projections for the merger. Hand them over." Julian's fingers trembled as he gripped the file folder. He was the executive assistant to the most dangerous man in the corporate world. For 3 years, Julian had played the part of the perfect, scentless beta. He was efficient, cold, and utterly indispensable. He had erased his history, forged his medical records, and taken suppressants strong enough to sterilize a horse, all to infiltrate Thorne Enterprises. He was here for corporate espionage, to find the evidence that Cassius Thorne had orchestrated the hostile takeover that drove Julian's father to suicide. He wasn't here to fall into heat in the middle of a Monday morning briefing. "Sir," Julian managed, his voice sounding wet and fractured to his own ears. He took a step forward, but his knees buckled. He caught himself on the back of a leather guest chair, his knuckles turning white. Cassius finally looked up. The movement was slow, predatory. He dropped the tablet onto the mahogany desk with a heavy thud. His eyes, the color of a winter storm, narrowed instantly. "Vane." Cassius stood up. He was massive, a broad-shouldered wall of muscle encased in a bespoke 3-piece charcoal suit. "You're flushing. Is it the flu? I told you, sickness is a weakness I don't tolerate in my inner circle." I apologize, Mr. Thorne," Julian gasped, fighting the urge to whimper. The heat was boiling his blood, a fever that had nothing to do with a virus. His scent blockers must have failed. Or worse, someone had tampered with them. He remembered the coffee the intern, Sarah, had brought him earlier. It had tasted slightly bitter. Think, Julian. Think. I need to excuse myself. Immediate leave. Leave. Cassius walked around the desk. He moved with the silent grace of a jungle cat, closing the distance between them. "We have the board meeting in 20 minutes. You are the only one who knows the counter-arguments for the acquisition. You are not going anywhere." Cassius stopped 3 feet away. Then he froze. The air between them shifted. The sterile office atmosphere was suddenly punctured by a new aroma. It started faint, then bloomed violently, the scent of honeyed peaches and vanilla, laced with the sharp metallic tang of distress. It was an omega scent, a prime omega in the early, desperate stages of a heat cycle. Cassius inhaled, his nostrils flaring. His pupils blew wide, swallowing the gray of his irises until his eyes were almost black. The primal instinct of an alpha recognizing a mate or prey flooded the room, heavy and suffocating. "Vane," Cassius whispered, the name sounding entirely different now. It wasn't the name of an employee. It was a question. "What is that smell?" Julian backed away, his back hitting the closed elevator doors. I spilled. Cologne. It's a new cologne. Don't lie to me. Cassius took another step, his voice dropping into a growl that wasn't human. It was the command voice, a vocal frequency that forced submission from anyone of lower status. That isn't cologne. That is pheromones. Omega pheromones. Julian clamped a hand over his mouth, his body instinctively trying to curl inward to protect his vitals. The command voice rattled his bones. His carefully constructed lie, the beta persona he had worn like armor, shattered into dust. I have to go, Julian pleaded, turning to jam the elevator button. The light didn't turn on. I locked it, Cassius said, his voice deceptively calm now, though the veins in his neck were cording with tension. System override. No one enters or leaves this floor until I understand why my beta executive assistant smells like an omega in heat. Let me out, Cassius, Julian shouted, dropping the honorifics in his panic. Cassius. The alpha tilted his head, a dark amusement flickering across his face. You've never called me by my first name, Julian. I like it. He stepped closer, crowding Julian against the brushed steel of the elevator doors. He placed one hand on the metal beside Julian's head, boxing him in. 3 years. You've been by my side for 3 years. You've handled my schedule, my rivals, my life. And you've been lying to me every single day. I had to, Julian choked out, the heat making his head spin. He slid down the wall, his legs giving out, until he was crouching on the floor. You don't hire omegas. You said. You said they were liabilities. Distractions. And so you decided to commit fraud? Cassius loomed over him, blocking out the office lights. Do you know what I do to liars, Julian? Do you know what I do to spies? Julian looked up, sweat matting his dark hair to his forehead. I know. You destroy them. Usually, Cassius murmured. He knelt, his expensive suit straining against his thighs. He reached out, gripping Julian's chin with long, powerful fingers. His touch was scorching. But you are not just a liar, are you? You are the most competent person I have ever met. And right now, you smell like you belong to me. I don't belong to anyone, Julian spat, trying to pull his face away, but his body betrayed him. At the touch of the alpha, a jolt of pleasure shot through his spine. He leaned into the hand despite himself. Your mouth says one thing, but your scent. Cassius leaned in, burying his face in the crook of Julian's neck. He inhaled deeply, groaning at the contact. Your scent is screaming for me to claim you, to bite you, to make sure no one else ever looks at you again. Please, Julian whispered, tears of humiliation and need pricking his eyes. The suppressants. They must have been swapped. I didn't plan this. I know, Cassius said, pulling back slightly to look into Julian's eyes. The alpha's gaze was intense, analytical, fighting a war between his intellect and his instincts. If you had planned this to seduce me, you would have done it at the gala tonight in front of the cameras. This is raw. This is an accident. Cassius stood up abruptly, turning his back on Julian. He walked to his desk, grabbed a heavy crystal decanter of whiskey, and poured a glass. He downed it in one swallow, his hand shaking slightly. The board meeting is cancelled, Cassius announced to the empty room. He tapped his earpiece. Security. Initiate protocol lockdown on the penthouse. Medical emergency. No entry under any circumstances. Clear the floor below us as well. Julian curled into a ball, hugging his knees. What are you doing? Saving your life? Cassius growled, loosening his tie and throwing it onto the floor. If you walk out those doors smelling like this, the security alphas in the lobby will tear you apart before you reach the street. You are in a high-level heat, Julian. You are a beacon. So I'm your prisoner? For the next 3 days? Yes. Cassius walked back to him. He didn't look like a CEO anymore. He looked like a warlord. But I am not going to touch you. Not unless you beg for it. And even then, I might not give you what you want. Julian looked up, confusion warring with the haze in his mind. Why? You hate omegas. You could ruin me right now. You could take what you want and fire me. Cassius crouched down again, his expression unreadable. Because you are Julian Vane. You are the only person in this building who challenges me. You are the only one who isn't afraid of me. If I take you now, while your mind is clouded by biology, I lose that. I lose you, and I find that unacceptable. He reached out not to grab but to offer a hand. Come. The private suite is in the back. I have soundproofing. I have fresh clothes. And I have heavy-duty suppressants in the safe for emergencies. Though I suspect it's too late for pills now. Julian stared at the hand. It was the hand of the man who had ruined his family. The enemy. But right now it was the only lifeline he had in a drowning ocean. Julian took it. The next 48 hours were a blur of fever dreams and fragmented reality. They were trapped in the high-tech luxury of the CEO's private living quarters attached to the office. The storm outside lashed against the glass, mirroring the tempest inside the room. Julian spent most of the time in the nest he had instinctively built out of the expensive Egyptian cotton sheets and, to his mortification, several of Cassius's dress shirts that he had pilfered from the wardrobe. The scent of the alpha on the fabric was the only thing that settled his racing heart. Cassius kept his distance physically, but his presence was everywhere. He sat in the armchair across the room, working on his laptop, reading documents, or simply watching Julian with those intense, brooding eyes. He brought water. He brought food. He wet cloths to cool Julian's forehead when the fever spiked. It was torture. It was a slow burn agony. On the second night, the fever broke, leaving Julian hollowed out and hypersensitive. He lay in the tangle of sheets, watching Cassius pour a glass of water. The alpha looked exhausted. Dark circles bruised the skin under his eyes. His jaw was shadowed with stubble. He hadn't slept. He had stood guard. Why? Julian rasped. His voice was hoarse. Cassius paused, the pitcher hovering over the glass. You asked me that before, and you gave me a corporate answer. I want the truth. Julian sat up, the sheet pooling at his waist. You're Cassius Thorne. You eat people alive. Why are you nursing a lying employee? Cassius walked over and placed the water on the nightstand. He didn't retreat to the armchair this time. He sat on the edge of the bed. The mattress dipped under his weight. Do you know why I destroyed Vane Industries 5 years ago? Cassius asked quietly. Julian froze. His heart stopped. I don't know what you mean. Stop it, Julian. Cassius's voice was weary. I ran a background check on you the day I hired you. A real one. Not the superficial garbage HR does. I knew who you were from day one. Julian Vane. Son of Marcus Vane. Julian felt the blood drain from his face. You knew? And you let me stay? You let me handle your private files. I wanted to see what you would do, Cassius admitted, looking down at his hands. I expected you to steal money, or sell secrets, but you didn't. You worked. You organized my life. You fixed my mistakes. You protected this company better than I did. Cassius looked up, and the raw vulnerability in his eyes took Julian's breath away. I destroyed your father's company because he was laundering money for the syndicate. He was going to get people killed. I didn't know he would take his own life. I never wanted that. He was laundering, Julian whispered. The foundation of his revenge, the anger that had fueled him for years, cracked. I have the files. I can show you. I kept them, waiting for the day you would finally try to stab me in the back so I could explain. Cassius reached out, his fingers hovering over Julian's hand but not touching. But you never stabbed me. You just made my coffee and saved my mergers. I hated you, Julian said, but the fire was gone. I tried so hard to hate you. And now, Julian looked at the alpha. He saw the restraint. He saw the man who had starved his own instincts for 2 days to protect an enemy. Now, I don't know. Then let me help you decide, Cassius murmured. He leaned forward. It was a slow, deliberate movement, giving Julian every chance to pull away. Julian didn't. He stayed rooted, his breath hitching. Cassius brushed his lips against Julian's temple. It was a chaste, reverent touch, shocking in its gentleness. The heat is fading, Cassius whispered against his skin. But your scent has changed. It's not distressed anymore. Accepting. Is that biology? Or is that me? Julian asked, his hand rising to grip the lapel of Cassius's shirt. Does it matter? Cassius pulled back just enough to look at his mouth. We are partners, Julian. In the boardroom and, if you'll have me, here. I don't want a submissive Omega. I don't want a housewife. I want the man who looked me in the eye and lied to my face for 3 years. I want the wolf in sheep's clothing. I'm not a wolf, Julian breathed. I'm just an Omega. You are the most dangerous creature in this city, Cassius corrected. And I am tired of fighting you. He closed the gap. The kiss wasn't tentative. It was a collision. It was the breaking of a dam. Cassius tasted of whiskey and exhaustion. Julian tasted of fever and need. It was a claiming not of ownership but of recognition. Julian's fingers tangled in Cassius's hair, pulling him deeper. For the first time in his life he wasn't hiding. He wasn't pretending to be a beta. He wasn't the son of a disgraced CEO. He was just Julian, and the most powerful man in the world was on his knees before him, worshipping him. The morning sun cut through the floor-to-ceiling windows, blinding in its intensity. Julian woke up alone in the massive bed, but the space beside him was still warm. He sat up, the sheet sliding down his chest. He felt different. The frantic heat was gone, replaced by a deep, bone-settling calm, and there was a new scent on his skin. Cassius. The door opened. Cassius walked in holding 2 cups of coffee and a tablet. He was showered, shaved, and dressed in a fresh suit. The armor was back on, but when he looked at Julian, the steel in his eyes melted. The board meeting has been rescheduled for noon, Cassius said, setting the coffee down on the nightstand. I told them we were finalizing a sensitive acquisition. Were we? Julian took the coffee, raising an eyebrow. I believe the negotiations were successful, Cassius smirked, a rare, genuine expression that transformed his face. However, we have a problem. My identity? Julian asked, blowing on the steam. No. I fired Sarah, Cassius said, his voice turning cold. Security footage showed her spiking your coffee. She was paid by a rival firm to out you during the meeting. They wanted to humiliate you to get to me. Julian gripped the mug. She knew. She guessed. And she paid for it. She will never work in this city again. Cassius sat on the edge of the bed, placing his hand over Julian's. But that leaves the position of executive assistant open. I can't go back out there, Julian said, looking at the door. People will smell you on me. They'll know. Let them know, Cassius said fiercely. Let them know that you belong to me. Let them know that touching you is an act of war against Thorn Enterprises. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a velvet box. He tossed it onto the duvet. That isn't a ring, Cassius said. It's a key. To the private elevator. To the safe. To my apartment. Julian stared at the box. You move fast. I'm an alpha. I see what I want, and I secure it. Cassius stood up, checking his watch. Get dressed, Julian. Wear one of my suits. They'll fit the shoulders, if not the waist. We have a company to run. And I can't do it without you. Julian watched him walk toward the door. The dynamic had shifted. He wasn't the secretary anymore. He was the partner. The secret weapon. Cassius. The alpha stopped at the door, hand on the frame. You missed a spot shaving, Julian lied, a small smile playing on his lips. Cassius touched his jaw, then looked back, his eyes darkening with a promise of things to come later that night. Noted. Don't be late, Vane. Julian picked up the velvet box. He opened it. Inside lay a heavy, platinum keycard and a small USB drive labeled Vane Industries, exoneration evidence. He closed his fist around it, feeling the cold metal bite into his palm. The revenge was over. The rain was just beginning. And that is how the viper tamed the wolf. If you enjoyed seeing Julian take control of the situation and the alpha, destroy that like button. And tell me in the comments. Would you forgive a man who destroyed your family's legacy if he did it to save lives? I'll be reading your answers. Subscribe for the next chapter. Until then,